What is a low skill character? I would say is a non-mechanically intensive character that is self-explanatory in the sense that the cooldowns speak for themselves. They are extremely easy to get value off of and therefore dominate the lower ranks. Is having these characters a bad thing though? Well, I think they will speak for themselves. Hey guys, welcome back to another Overwatch video. Today we'll be talking about how having low skill characters in hero shooters is fundamentally flawed. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's just get right into it. I define what a low skill character is, but it is important to not widen the concept of low skill heroes to just non-mechanically reliant heroes, or else more than half of the roster will be considered low skill. When talking about characters' skill level, it is important to mention the two concepts of skill floor and skill ceiling. Skill floor is how easily you can pick up and learn the character or game. Games or characters with low skill floors are more simple and casual friendly, while games or characters with high skill floors are the opposite. The Dark Souls trilogy, I would say, has a high skill floor because it has complicated mechanics and a difficulty level that, unless you invest time into learning the secrets and best options for the builds, is going to be very difficult for most first-time players. Skill ceiling can be broken down into this. How wide is the gap between the average player and the best player? Meaning, how good are you able to become at this? A good example of this is the Pokemon games. If you are just playing the main story, then sure, there is an optimal team for each game, but realistically, you can beat it with pretty much anything if you are high enough level. However, competitive Pokemon has a very high skill ceiling. You have to optimize the stats, move pools, items of your teams, while also having a good idea of what moves, abilities, and items the opponent might have. So why do I bring this up? Well, I'm establishing what characters I am specifically mentioning are bad for this game. You see, having a low skill floor character isn't necessarily bad for the game, as long as they have a high skill ceiling in addition to it. Allowing the player to be able to feel like they could have done better or creating a desire to improve is what fuels a great game and great competition as well. This is why having a cheap option is so dangerous. If players feel like they can cheat the system by picking up an easy character that isn't hard to master, that'll frustrate those who are genuinely trying to improve. What's worse is that those lower skill characters who are easy to master are often not great in higher play, as playing a more difficult hero with better abilities is almost always the superior decision. Two characters who represent how low skill floor characters should and should not be made are Winston and Mercy. Winston has been in the game since launch and has historically been one of the most popular and well-liked characters, with a praised design and fun gameplay loop. Winston doesn't require much to pick up and start playing, as his kit is very simple. AoE primary fire that auto-locks along with a jump, a bubble, and an ultimate that restores health and switches the character to melee. However, the difference between a higher elo Winston and a lower is clear and obvious. The difference is visual, as you can see primal juggles, diving space more often, and securing more kills. He has no get out of jail free card, so if you make a mistake and die in that scenario, you can get instant feedback and learn, rather than get a pass. Mercy is the contrary character to this. She has no aim requirement with her staff, and you don't even have to focus on dealing damage 90% of the time, meaning you can just focus on positioning and who to heal, really dumbing her gameplay down. She has Guardian Angel, which swiftly brings you to someone in the case of mispositioning, and can be a real challenge while she's moving to hit for lower ranked players. She also has infinite damage boost, meaning it's not a resource you have to manage, so you don't have to worry about whether you used a cooldown at the correct time or not, and just paying attention to when your target has high HP or not. Resurrect is a rescue cooldown that has a high reward, so it's one of her better cooldowns, but then again you are just bailing out someone else's mistake with just one cooldown. Her ultimate just enhances her existing kit and makes Mercy just better at what Mercy is already good at. The only notable difference in gameplay between lower and higher elo Mercy players is their use of super jump tech and when not to resurrect teammates. Because of Mercy's dumbed down and low but free value kit, she remains never made meta and hated among 90% of the GM Plus players. Meanwhile, as Mercy and other characters who I will soon lay out are hated for being trash among high-ranked players, there are people who think the character is actually broken and unfair in lower ranks. This is because of the aforementioned idea of someone who is taking a shortcut of learning something easy and mildly rewarding rather than hard and very rewarding. Because the low elo players most of the time only see what is going on in their games and how easy it is for that player to get value, they think it is an extremely rewarding character and becomes discouraged from learning more challenging characters as they get more value off of the easier other characters. Those who play the low skill characters are thereby rewarded for learning them, as they are so easy to get value off of that it seems almost impossible to stop unless you have prior knowledge or ability of how to stop it. Think about it this way: if both players are level 1 in terms of skill, one is playing Genji and one is playing Moira, who will win? More often than not, the Moira will, just because she is easier than Genji. This leads me into my next topic of the characters who have or used to have common sentiments of being broken in lower ranks, while in reality being not great at all in the actual competitive ranks. In Overwatch 1, if you were in the lower ranks, one of, if not the most commonly accepted, most broken characters was Bastion. He only had 2 abilities and was one of the easiest characters to understand. You walk onto high ground with your tank, go into turret form while he shields you. You then proceed to kill everything and self-heal when necessary. This alone was too much for most low-ranked players, as it required you to have at least minor coordination and setting up proper angles. Going Bastion in Overwatch 1 lower ranks was basically the equivalent of counter-swapping now, choosing the cheaper option rather than innovating and improving on your existing gameplay, and being flamed by the enemies in match chat while you're at it. Meanwhile, in the higher ranks, he was terrible for a long time, until Double Shield and Baptiste came out. There wasn't enough sustain to keep him up against a coordinated team, as going into the higher ranks more people are in comms or assume and play off their teammates' moves, meaning seeing a Bastion behind a shield might be a good sight instead, as they know the comp's main weakness and know that Bastion is very limited in what he can do, besides become a glorified turret with self-heal. Moira is next, and is the nightmare of every bronze Genji, as I've mentioned before. She has an intuitive kit, as everything she has boils down to raw healing or damage, except for Fade, which is just a free movement ability and invincibility cooldown. Her primary fire is an auto-lock beam, meaning looking in the direction means you're already getting max damage. This allows her to be very difficult to duel for most DPS, as she will almost always be outputting more damage than mechanically challenged, low-ranked DPS players. Because of their inconsistent accuracy and her lifesteal, in addition to the support passive, she seems to become essentially unkillable. With high consistent DPS output, in terms of Moira's skill expression, there is very little. Aside from learning fade jumps and less flashy stuff like when to DPS and when to heal, there is virtually nothing Moira can show in terms of skill expression. Because you having to aim, use abilities more correctly, characters like Juno and Ana are inherently more difficult than Mercy and Moira. Even though those characters are flat out better, they'll be performed in lower ranks due to the others being easier. And just like Mercy, Moira is almost never meta, and in higher ranks is almost never played or desired for your ranked games team comp. One more character that represents this low skill floor and ceiling problem is Reaper. However, of the 4 I've mentioned, I think he has the most skill expression. He mechanically at least has guns he has to aim, but most of the time you're shooting tanks with a shotgun radius, so he really still isn't setting any records. His kit is also extremely simple. He has lifesteal in addition to Wraith, which gives you invincibility for a few seconds, in addition to movement speed and reloading your weapons, while not being able to shoot in the form. It's as simple as when in trouble or when need quick reload, press button. His other ability is just a teleport. You disappear quickly and then reappear in your chosen spot. Nothing much to say here. His ultimate is just AoE big damage and lifesteal. In terms of skill expression, aside from aim and the standard of positioning, timing of cooldowns, and target priority, there's really nothing else. The standard gameplay loop is extremely consistent across ranks. In lower ranks, he is a terror, as his easier aim and cooldowns allow him to 1v1 other DPS much more efficiently, while tanks not knowing how to play around him is a bonus on top of that. Meanwhile, in higher ranks, he has been a more inconsistent off-and-on meta pick for the game's history, except for the times, like recently, where they will micro-buff him into oblivion. Overwatch isn't the only game that suffers this problem. Marvel Rivals has their own auto-lock-on woman, and her name is Scarlet Witch. She has a similar thing where she can press a button and gain movement speed in addition to immunity from damage for a time. She has AoE stuns and her alternate fire, which does require some amount of aim, but the majority of her kit revolves around flying invincible and then leading into an auto-lock tracking beam. Her ultimate, just being a big AoE with insta-kill, doesn't sound too inherently hard. However, if the enemy team has proper cooldown usage and aim, it can be difficult to land. However, in lower ranks, when people's aim and cooldown usage is just worse, it is a really easy ultimate to land. When she's played in lower ranks, the same principles as Moira follows, except she's an actual DPS, so she doesn't even have to forego healing responsibility to dual you. Similarly to Moira, she's almost never played in higher ranks, as her value is almost non-existent compared to other characters who do more than dual OK and have a high-risk, high-reward ultimate. She just doesn't have enough utility in her damage or cooldowns to compete with the other damage characters. In conclusion, the main problem with low-skill characters, or specifically low-skill floor, low-skill ceiling characters, is that they don't offer anything new to the game. Their easy kit is frustrating to play against and not conducive to encouraging the newer players to work hard at learning the game on a more challenging but rewarding character. They also usually have low-value kits that don't transfer well into higher ranks, meaning if people remain to pick them into higher ranks, it causes frustration and anger because your teammates are just playing inferior characters to the average character of their category. Thanks for watching this far. Make sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell, stay tuned for next week's video, and have a great day.